This is the Cold Cases. I'm Dustin, your host, and today I have with me Reverend Kevin Stephenson, who's the president of Faith Based Films and also does work with the diocese there. Um, so we're talking about the 1921 Tulsa race riots. He has a film that he's hoping to turn into reality. There's a documentary intro to the documentary on his website. Um, so, Reverend Stevenson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Kevin Stephenson. So I'm a deacon within the Roman Catholic Diocese of Tulsa and Eastern Oklahoma. And so I serve in various capacities. And I'm also president of Faith Based Films. We've had this company for a couple of years now. And I'm also executive director for a nonprofit called St. Augustine Behavioral Health. So I'm a mental health professional as well. I've been doing that pretty much for a career. So I work with people that have experienced psychological abuse and mental health issues. So I also do that. So yeah. So that background brings me to this point.
Yeah, yeah. And getting into the story, I didn't know about the 1921 Tulsa race riots until many years after I was out of school and everything. Um, so, why do you think telling the story is so important?
Right. Sorry, you broke up there a little bit. Are you asking me why this story is important? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, why do you feel this story is so important?
Okay. All right. So for a couple of reasons. Um, one of the most tragic things we experience, I know here, also in our country, is racial divide. And that's not just unique to our community, but it's been the story of mankind. There's always one group against another. And so
Hmm.
unfortunately, we had a tragic experience in 1921 where there was a race massacre. Where you had African Americans were attacked by white Americans in this part of the country, and it affected hundreds of lives, and there was death and so on. So it's been a very sore point in that. So with
Yeah,
all
yeah,
tragedies, there's always this component of what did we do? What can we learn from that? So um,
yeah.
so from that story, I uncovered some good things that people had done during that period of time. So I wanted to bring that truth to light, but also talk about what a few people did during a very, very difficult time and these are true stories during that very difficult time here in Tulsa. So I think for
Yeah.
us to understand history, it's good to understand all the truth so that we can learn from that and making sure those things don't occur in the future.
Yes, sir. And so because in the documentary, the intro of the documentary, the Holy Family Cathedral did a lot of good things, and I was just wondering what all did the Holy Family Cathedral do?
Okay. Well, the night that the riot unfolded, it was May 30th, 1921. And at that time, Holy Family Cathedral was conducting a graduation with children. And and they were made aware that there was, and this is right where they were located, the Brady Theater, that's right in the location where the riot was unfolding. And so in that time, the key thing was to make sure the children got home because nobody really knew what was happening. But also within that, the priest at that time, he felt the need to do something. And because Holy Family, being Catholic, did have African American parishioners at that point. And so
Hmm.
what he felt he needed to do was just like a spur of the moment that he wanted to become a place of refuge, which he did. And so while the riots were unfolding, while the massacre was unfolding, word was given out that Holy Family Cathedral would be a safe haven. And
Oh,
so that was the piece, and it was a risk not only, of course, for the African Americans that were being attacked, but also for people that will be willing to provide quarter and safety at the same time. So I wanted to highlight some of those stories of what actually happened. And during the period of the massacre, about 100 to 200 African Americans, including 70 babies, were rescued and protected in the basement while the
Oh,
violence
wow.
was unfolding around them. And so I wanted to focus in on that story, and the reason why, I enjoy film, and there's a couple of films that I
Yeah.
like Schindler's List, right? So there you have the story of this Nazi sympathizer who's making money off of the genocide that was taking place, but he was moved to compassion, and he uses his factory as a place to save 1,000 Jews, and that's a story within itself.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg wrote that story, and it's been just a wonderful story. We're not judging who was right or was wrong. What we're looking at is when there's evil, it just takes one person to do a good thing, and that's really
Hmm.
what is really the highlight. So that's one example. Another film that I liked, hopefully your listeners have seen, it's called Hotel Rwanda. It was talking about the
Oh, yeah,
Rwanda
I've seen that.
massacre, right? Do you remember
Yeah.
seeing that? And so
Yes, it was great.
I don't know what
Great
side he was
movie.
on, but I think the hotel manager was the side of the dominant group, the Hutus or the Tutus, one of those.
Yeah.
But he saw fit within his hotel, even though he was his tribe were the ones that were doing the massacre. He protected a couple of hundred opposing tribe members in his hotel to the point where he's risking his life. So stories like that, I think are important for people to know that in
Oh,
the
definitely,
face of
definitely.
hatred, it just takes one or two people to do the right thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um, so I got a question here that, growing up in Oklahoma, you know, I was never taught about this at all. And my question is, why do you think the public and Oklahomans in particular haven't been taught about this history?
That's a great question. So let me just share my background. So I came to Tulsa to go to school, to go to Oral Roberts University. So I was raised in New Jersey.
Hmm.
So a lot of my family lived in New Jersey, New York, in Boston. And I never heard of that. I never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre. What we heard about was Harlem, the Renaissance in Harlem, or the riots that took place in Newark, or the riots that took place in LA. During the 60s, all that time. I never knew that even existed. It wasn't part of what we were taught as blacks on the East Coast. I'm talking about being raised in the 70s and the 80s. Never heard about it myself. So it was a
Hmm.
shock. So I don't know why I didn't even hear about it, where I was growing up in the East Coast. It's just one of those things, one of those stories, those narratives that just weren't told. My guess is maybe there's a lot of shame attached to that story. Like as a mental health counselor, I work with people that experience abuse. And within families, people
Hmm.
don't really want to talk about that, right? Because it's shameful. But the way for healing is by talking about those experiences. It's important to tell the truth. And then what can we do? What can we do as a lesson to make sure that doesn't happen again, so we can make sure, we can find healing in the future. So I'm thinking it's probably more of a psychological issue, maybe because it's so rooted in shame that no one wants to talk about it. But unfortunately, when it comes to trauma, you have to face the truth, right? Because that within itself, there's dignity. As horrible as it was, there's a dignity in telling the truth. But then from that, we come with, what do we learn from that so that doesn't happen again? And so I think that's part of what I want to do. My job is not to, I mean, now we know about the story, but even in a horrible time like that, there are a few people that did a really good thing by saving, by risking their lives to rescue those that were victimized. And it's not about black or white. It's about people doing good and people doing evil, if that makes sense. It's really
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
good versus evil. And so it's a story, even within that, I think that needs to be told, because not everybody was evil during 1921. There were a few good people that did a right thing at that time. And I think those people need to be lifted up in this story, which is a truthful story. So that's part of what I
Yeah.
want to do, is to highlight those that did good, and the effects that that
So
good has in the future.
so what I'm getting from you is this story needs to be told because it helps us grow and heal, and it
Right.
also highlights the heroes who were about that time. And just like your work in mental health, I've worked in mental health as well. And yeah, everything you're doing is great because it grows and heals people. And the other thing I'll say is Oklahoma has always had that kind of shame around it because
Yeah.
the Indians had to go there and all that kind of stuff. And what you're doing is growing and healing the part of Oklahoma that feels that has the shame around it. And I think what you're doing is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And within that story, there are a lot of other sub stories, because you talk about
Hmm.
Native Americans. So there were freedmen that were here, that were families that were part of the Black Wall Street, who became
Hmm.
very successful at that time. So they're half Cherokee and half African American, and even within that, there's a story. you know, I mean, so
Yeah.
so what was the experience of freedmen? For them being liberated, but then being so there's sub stories within that. So my hopes are that 1921 won't just only be about the massacre, but those families that migrated to that. So what I'd like to do in the future, I'd love to see this become a series. I think I think that the massacre could be the inciting incident. Okay, that's the crisis. So here's everybody
Hmm.
gathered in the basement of the Holy Family, but then you have these wonderful people with their stories. How did they get there? And so I would like to talk about the freedmen, because there's some great stories of the Black Wall Street, of people that were Cherokee and Native American, and what they had to struggle with, on top of that trauma. So there's a lot of spin-off stories that will come from that, and even some of the whites that are involved, they within their own families had struggle, because back then with Jim Crow, there was segregation. So what did those families had to deal with by stepping out and doing that? So we're talking about family trauma, family prejudice, people overcoming that. We're talking about African Americans and Native Americans, freedmen who are part of that, and what they had to deal with, of being both
Hmm.
Native American, and because actually all prior to the Black Wall Street, that was all Creek. That was all I think Muskogee Creek. I believe that's the Native American group
Yes,
that
yes, sir.
owned all that land. So even they have a story. I mean, so what happened to the Native Americans? That own that land. So there are a lot of great sub stories that need to be told. And my hope is that this will become a series where we'll dive into the lives of these people at that time. But it happened to be that the Rice Massacre was the event that got everything going. But there's so many other beautiful stories and tough stories that need to be told about the whole experience, within that.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed in the short documentary that you've already created is those stories are really like highlighted. They're very powerful in just that time that I saw that part of the documentary. The little time that you've already made some of the documentary, those stories are very powerful. And so let me ask you, how can people help you turn this film into a reality?
Okay, thank you for asking that. All right, so I created a website. It's called 1921film.org. And so I put that out there, and I created a donation page, and it's attached to my nonprofit, which is my mental health company. So people that make donations, it's a tax deductible. So I'm working with my mental health nonprofit organization, and I'm working also with my LLC, faith-based films, to do that. So of course, with anything, this has to be a grassroots. And so what I'm asking people to do is go to that website, or even go to faithbasedfilm.org, and there'll be a donation link. And what we're doing is raising funds. I really want to get the money in place first. And so as a nonprofit, I'm going to charitable organizations, and I'm looking at foundations that be willing to support a project like this. so that so that those that are going to be a part of it, I want them to be compensated. I want to get the very best talent that we have in Oklahoma. So with that, being that this is an Oklahoma story, I want to be able to raise enough money to pay my talents and the crew, particularly those that are Oklahoma based. And let me just share something. So I'm going to
Hmm.
Oklahoma State University, Tulsa, to their film school, and that's where I put that documentary together. So it's under OSU's film program, and that film program has been funded by the Cherokee Nation. So already, because of that being in place, we're able to put that documentary together. But what I want to do is expand that work and make it probably most likely make a feature film out of it, and then
Yeah.
branch off into series. And I would like to be able to use different talents and different directors that are here in Oklahoma to do different series, to work on different stories. I want this to be an ongoing story utilizing Oklahoma talents. I mean, that's something I think that's really important. I'm not downplaying Hollywood. I'm not downplaying the big movie studios, but I really want this to be a story that Oklahoma talent
Yeah.
can wrap their heads around, and it'd be something that's our own, so we can hold to the integrity of their story and just tell it like it is without any agendas. So I created that
Yeah.
website and a donation link so people can help fund the project, so that will help pay Oklahoma-based talent and crew members to do this documentary and film it on site in Greenwood. I mean, to me is the best of both worlds. And I would like to use descendants of families that were actually there and use their great grandkids, let them be part of the story. I would love to recreate the whole
Yeah.
thing and make it as authentic as possible, so I can dive into the story. So that's really my vision. But it will take funding, because I want this to be top
Yeah.
quality as best as possible.
Yeah. Well, we're going to put out the word on this, and we're going to have links to your website and everything. So I wish you so much success in getting this film made, because it already looked, it already was inspiring to me. That's why I reached out to you and everything. And, I love what you've already done with it. So,
I appreciate it. Please keep us in prayer, that we get wisdom, and that this story be a source of healing. Let me just make a short note. So I even talked about the benefits. So there's a lot of great things that happened after the massacre. And it was not just Holy Family Cathedral, but the only ones. But what they did, they established a church in that community and also a school, and they ended up, teaching hundreds of children, with that. And so the Catholic Church set up a school in the north side. It's probably one of the first, so and there were other people that did great things to help rebuild that part of Tulsa. So there's a lot of good things that came out of that. And I'd like to dive into those stories too, what happened, and what some of the healing is, and some of those good redemptive stories that took place after the massacre.
yes, sir. That sounds great. Look forward to it. It's already great, but make it into a bigger story and it'll be even greater,
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time today, and go look at his website and go donate.